Once upon a time, I was given the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to race in the British Touring Car Championship, the BTCC, the UK's top motorsport series, in the final race of the season at Brands Hatch. To prepare for that weekend, I had one test day at Donington Park, and that's what you're seeing here in this video clip. As regular driver Jason Plato was taking a break during the pandemic,
Philpot was driving really well. He's impressive.
His seat was being offered out at a much lower price than you'd normally pay to race in BTCC. And after months of searching, I'd somehow managed to gather together enough sponsorship to race in the final round of the championship. There would be no damage budget. I couldn't afford a single incident, and there was certainly no money for new tyres. I was going to have to make do with what I was given. But after racing on the Nürburgring for the previous 3 years, dealing with anything that was thrown at me, I felt like I'd be prepared regardless. And luckily for me, I did get some final preparation before I raced at Brands Hatch, when Avon Tyres, who I was working for as a test driver at the time, sponsored me to race at Silverstone in a GT event just a few weeks before the BTCC race. And here's how that went down.
And the race is about to get underway.
In this event, I was thrown in with absolutely no testing. My first drive in the car was qualifying, and I ended up in third place. But getting to the front of the race was going to be extremely difficult. As you can see from this footage, we were racing against cars with a lot more power and therefore a lot more speed on Silverstone's long straights. This would be hard. At some points, it felt like my straight line speed deficit was dangerous, with the Porsche Cayman in particular approaching me at around about 40 miles per hour at the end of the straights. But my little Lotus's handling in the corners was making up for it, and I was able to close in under braking and make up huge time through the middle of the fast corners. And as the timer ticked down before the mandatory pit stop, I was still in contention for the win. I just needed to stay close and find a way past when the opportunity presented itself. But then a car got stuck in the gravel and the yellow flags came out. And in the confusion of lapping traffic, my rival in the Porsche overtook under yellow flags, which was a guaranteed penalty. But just as things were starting to look good for me, my own luck took a turn for the worst, as my clutch entirely failed. Living up to its legendarily bad reliability, the Lotus's clutch pedal went straight to the floor, and I was about to make a pit stop where I'd have to be stationary. So I waited one lap and then pitted under a full course yellow to try and jump my rival in the Cupra TCR car. But what I was going to do when I got to the pit box, I had no idea. Over the previous couple of laps, I'd simply been blipping the throttle to change gear, but that doesn't help you when you need to be stationary. So here's how it unfolded.
Guys, I've got no clutch. Look. Right. So you have to box start me somehow. Push me first and I'll click in the gear. I'm going to stick in the first once we get over.
Miraculously, the car ground into first gear and bump started. As long as I could keep the car moving now, we had a shot at the victory. We jumped the Cupra TCR car in the pits, and I was confident that the Porsche was going to receive a penalty, although there was no sign of this from the stewards just yet. So I got my head down, pushed as hard as possible, and drove to the finish.
At the minute, and Brad Philpot is making his way into the garage here at Silverstone.
Obviously, the clutch was still a problem after the race, so I had to get pushed into the garage, and my only concern was whether or not the Porsche actually received a penalty, because I really wanted to win the race. So I went and checked with the team and then did an interview.
It was intense and hard, and the car went really well, except for the clutch. And yeah, very happy with our Avon Tyres performance over that race. I was just very surprised to see the grey Porsche come out ahead of us when I was convinced he had a penalty. So it's my first time racing back in the UK for a while, so I'm not quite sure what the procedure is. I'll go and find out.
And the procedure turned out to be 2 visits to the race director where I took my onboard footage and basically dobbed in the Porsche. So sorry about that, Porsche driver, but also you can't overtake under yellows. So it was off to Brands Hatch for my BTCC debut. But first, some media duties.
The British Touring Car Championship this year has been a revolving door of drivers. Some by choice, some because of the situation we all find ourselves in. But there is one team that has taken the situation by the scruff of the neck. That team is PMR. And today we are talking to Power Max Racing's newest driver, Bradley Philpot.
This really does feel like the next logical step for me. To me now coming back home to the UK to do the highest level of this kind of racing in the UK.
But that's enough of that. You're here to see some onboard, to see what it was like for me in my first race in the BTCC. So that's what's coming up next, and let me set the scene for you. We're at the Brands Hatch Indy circuit, it's a rainy November, and for the regular championship drivers, this is the title deciding round. I've done no testing at Brands Hatch, and I've never driven the car in the rain. And remember, I've got no damage budget. If I crash the car, I can't afford to fix it. And so that's the backdrop that this race is set against. But I had to try and put that to the back of my mind as I approached the grid at the end of the formation lap.
Welcome to Brands Hatch, where if the weather cooperates just a little bit more, we're set for another dramatic final day shootout to decide the Quick Fit British Touring Car Championship.
I've done my best to try and enhance the onboard video quality here so you can see through the windscreen, but this was a very wet race, and when the spray kicks up, it's almost impossible to see anything. Now there's a very specific start procedure in a BTCC car, especially when you're on a slight hill like I am here. You apply hard brake pressure and then press a button on the steering wheel to hold the brakes at that set pressure. Next, you move your left foot off the brake and over to the clutch, where you find the bite point and bring the revs up to maximum. And then finally, when the lights go out on the start gantry, you let go of the button and away you go.
Needs a good getaway by Ingram, good start by Camish as well. Sutton tries to find a way ahead of Butcher.
And considering that was my first time and it was wet, I got a pretty good start there. But then I couldn't see anything at all. I was faced with this wall of spray. And although I could see a tiny bit more than you can on the camera here, really I was just following the red lights of the cars in front of me. And going down through Paddock Hill Bend with rivers running across the track, this was sketchy to say the least. And really, my focus was just on trying to not have an accident, trying to not spin, trying to not lock up and crash into the car in front of me, because honestly it was just so difficult to see where I was going. And you're going to see in this video, not everyone managed to retain control. Some very experienced BTCC drivers fire it off the road directly in front of me. But I'll just keep quiet for a moment or so now so you can see this unfold and you can see me struggling with the conditions, all the while knowing that a single mistake could bankrupt me. So you're about to see the first of the mistakes that happens in front of me. Nick Hamilton there spinning off to the left, just aquaplaning on the water at the bottom of Graham Hill Bend. That's how treacherous these conditions were, and that's not the only off that you're going to see happen in front of me. Okay, next one coming up very soon. The Audi that I was just battling with is about to completely lose it into Paddock Hill Bend. So again, showing that I was really just trying to judge the risk level and that you could push harder, but then that kind of thing would easily happen to you. And remember, for me, this was really my first wet test session. I was learning the conditions as the race was going on, so seeing other people mess it up like that was slightly encouraging. It made me think that probably for my experience level in this car, I was judging things just about right, and I was staying just to the correct side of that risk-reward line. So it's probably obvious, but just to be clear, this car you're watching me drive doesn't have traction control, doesn't have ABS. So those key things that it's easy to mess up when you've got a lot of power in the wet, spinning the front wheels or locking the wheels under braking, it's quite easy for those things to happen. And the nature of this kind of car also means when you're trailing the brakes into the corners, you can also lock the rear axle and get sideways and have a big oversteer moment, which can end in tears. So the car is difficult to drive. Hopefully that's coming across in how much work I'm having to do behind the steering wheel. And every time you hear those front wheels spin up, when I give it just a little bit too much power on one of the exits. So lap time's starting to come down now. I just saw I was about half a second quicker on that previous lap than my best, so I'm starting to get a little bit more confident. I'm still clearly driving a little bit within myself, but given the circumstance, I'm not too displeased with this, and the pack isn't getting away from me dramatically. I can still see the cars in front of me, and importantly, I'm not making mistakes. I'm not throwing it off the road. So let's see a couple more laps. Now, interestingly, a lot of short shifts there, and I backed off very early. I think there's some yellow flags out. I think we've got a yellow flag zone, and I can also see a car really close in front of me here. So, much slower lap. I can't see on the video here what's going on, but I think there are yellow flags. And yeah, sure enough, we're slowing right down on the way up to Druids. There's clearly some kind of incident. Looks like a full course yellow or a safety car, so we're going to slow down. Let's see what happens next. Yeah, a couple of cars in the wall up at Druid, so they're being recovered. Let's fast forward then to the restart and see whether I can make any more progress now the race has been neutralised. And as the restart gets underway, we are actually catching up with that BMW in front of us, so over the next couple of laps I'll work hard on trying to get right on his tail. and the chasing was worth it. I managed to get past him around the outside into Paddock Hill Bend. I think he was struggling with overheating wet tyres, where I managed to preserve mine through the first half of the race. Now look, obviously I'm not coming home here with a podium finish or a win in my BTCC debut, but I think given the circumstances, this has looked like a relatively solid race. Managed to keep my head together when other people have lost theirs, and we've even managed to have a few on-track battles with established BTCC drivers who are used to these conditions and used to these cars, and most importantly, probably have some kind of damage budget. And as the race ends there, I'm pretty relieved to have managed to get through that first race unscathed. Now, there were 2 other races this weekend, but unfortunately, I was never given that footage by the team, so this is all I've got to go with. But I hope you've enjoyed this insight into what it was like for me in my first time in this series, and you've managed to get some of the flavour of the excitement, of the nerves that I was feeling at the time. Again, I apologise for the quality of the onboard video, this is just all I had to go with. But massive thank you for watching this video, and I hope you stay tuned for some of the awesome karting content we've got coming this year. You are all absolute legends for watching this right to the very end, and I appreciate every single one of your views. So until next time, love you, bye.